once it permeates your soul, you can't do anything else. It's so rewarding and so fulfilling. Those that are fortunate enough to be able to carry out their dream like I have been, you just can't envision living any other way.
Most ranchers have sort of a love affair with their land. Many of these ranches, these people have been on all their lives, 2 and 3 and 4 generations sometimes.
It's part of my heritage and the culture that I grew up with. My ancestors ranched, and I enjoy it. I really do. It's a good way of life.
Much of the substance and identity of California comes directly from its land, some of the most beautiful of which is privately owned ranch land. Tracing its history to early Spanish settlements and adapting with the times to survive, ranching has left an indelible mark on the state's economy, culture, and scenic beauty. A mark that is slowly eroding over time, giving way to the pressures of contemporary life. The California Rangeland Trust was established to protect some of the open space, working landscape, and wildlife habitat that makes California so unique, and to ensure that future generations of ranching families can continue their stewardship of rangelands.
The Rangeland Trust was started really by a large group of cattlemen who were interested in conservation and stewardship, but were uncomfortable with the idea that they only could accomplish those objectives by using environmental groups or environmentally oriented conservation groups, rather than groups that were made up more of people who knew and understood the cattle business and how they operated and what they needed to accomplish with their properties.
There's a lot of emotions involved in this ranch. It's given us a good life for 41 years. You want to take care of it. It's just like taking care of your kids. It becomes a part of you. It's part of the family.
That love affair with the land is what kept ranchers persevering through the many challenges they face, such as drought and cattle market cycles. The Trust works closely with rangeland owners to protect and enhance the environmental and economic benefits that these working landscapes provide. Today, there are more than 20 million acres of privately owned rangeland in California, but these lands are threatened and rapidly disappearing. From 1990 to 2000, more than 1 million acres were converted to other uses. 76,000 are now under development. This trend not only affects ranching, but also water, wildlife, and wildlife habitat. 95% of all federally threatened and endangered species have some habitat on private land. In addition, virtually all of the water consumed by California residents flows over this land. Unfortunately, many of the state's large-scale ranches now face fragmentation and subdivision. By dividing land into small parcels, ranchette development increases human impact, causes habitat fragmentation, and disrupts wildlife migration. A single property owner's decision to subdivide can spell the fate for many thousands of acres. Neighboring ranches are often negatively impacted, and the resulting increased land values can diminish the remaining rancher's ability to pass the land on to the next generation due to the threat of inheritance taxes. Today, most California ranches are now less than 5 miles from a subdivision, and the average size of rangeland properties is shrinking. So the goal of preserving rangelands goes hand in hand with preserving some of the state's best habitat for native plant and animal species. That's why the Rangeland Trust helps ranching families to prepare for the future by educating landowners about options for generational succession and business planning, as well as income diversification strategies. The Trust equips landowners with powerful tools like conservation easements, which help them lower estate tax burdens and ensure that ranching landscapes remain intact forever. By selling or donating development rights through a conservation easement, ranchers can lessen the taxable value of their property and preserve it as open space. One of California Rangeland Trust's success stories, and there are many, is the V6 Ranch. Owned by the Varian family, it encompasses 17,000 acres in southern Monterey County. It is now permanently protected from development and will forever remain as a working landscape.
The California Rangeland Trust focuses on maintaining the existing ranching uses of the lands and recognizes that with that you get the habitat, you get the vistas, you get all the things that people sort of know and understand and love about the rangeland, but you also keep the steward on the land, the person who's kept it functioning as a habitat place and as a place for people to live and work for generations.
Another success story is taking place in the Bridgeport Valley. Created largely through irrigation, the Bridgeport Valley is the largest wetland complex along the eastern Sierra. The Centennial Dressler Ranch makes up 1/3 of all irrigated acres in the valley, including tens of thousands of acre-feet of surface rights and 3,000 acre-feet of water from Twin Lakes. Centennial livestock owners Dave Wood and the Lacey family have preserved 6,000 acres in the valley by placing a conservation easement on their property. By permanently preserving the ranch as rangeland and ensuring continued irrigation, the conservation easement will protect tens of miles of riparian areas that serve as essential fish-rearing habitat for the entire Walker River system, one of the best trout fisheries in the West.
Conservation easements can really help sustain ranching as a business in California. When we start to see easements strategically placed, we also start to protect the critical mass of our industry, and that gives incentive for the feed stores to stay in those areas, for the ag lender, and for all the other related businesses. It's very important for the rural economies and for the communities.
These easements are a way for our older generation of ranchers to be able to capitalize on the lifetime investment they've made. And as these people advance in age, they only have two choices. They either sell it to developers, or they can look at doing an easement where they can still maintain a viable agricultural entity on the property, yet receive something back for their lifetime of work and investment in the property.
Yet another success story is taking place high in the Sierra Mountains. The Sparrock family and their business partners Dick Montfort and Rick Montera recently placed a conservation easement on their Bar 1 ranch in Sierra Valley. The easement will be monitored by the California Rangeland Trust and was funded through the cooperation of several conservation groups. Only 30 minutes from Reno, this is one of the largest alpine valleys in the United States. It faces immense development pressure. Under the terms of the easement, the Bar 1 will continue to be an active cattle ranch, but will also adopt stewardship measures to help protect the headwaters of the middle fork of the Feather River. Ranch manager Darrell Sweet believes the work that he and the Sparrock family have done with the trust will go a long way in ensuring the future of the cattle industry in the valley.
We really think one of the things that the California Rangeland Trust has done is allow ranchers to become really proactive in the environmental and the conservation movement, as opposed to just being on the outside looking in as conservation policies were developed and enacted. The Rangeland Trust has empowered cattle producers to be at the table and to be an important part of the conservation efforts in California.
We're all environmentalists at heart, and maybe that's not even the right word, but we're all definitely conservationists at heart.
I see our organization as a group of cowboy conservationists that are focused on protecting rangeland, wildlife, open space, clean air, clean water, and a multitude of conservation values.
Facing urban development and high inheritance taxes, it is the coming generation that will find it even harder to make a livelihood from ranching. The Rangeland Trust gives ranching families hope that they can continue as integral parts of California's identity, culture, and economy.
When the conversations came around about conservation easements, what they could possibly do to keep family ranches a business, I was very interested. I've got a daughter who's here with me today, and I'm very proud of her, and she wants to be in the business with me or on her own somewhere someday. And I have a son that has the same interests. And I can't imagine how many ranchers are going to be around in the next 10 to 15 years with urban pressures right next door. And I'm not sure that my son and daughter could have the opportunity in the cattle business if it wasn't for using the easement tool as keeping the lands there for them.
And I ranch because I want my son to grow up in that same atmosphere, and I want him to be able to carry on in my shoes if he so chooses, and hopefully he will. He's only 8 years old and he's got a lot of time to figure that out. And conservation easements might help him realize that dream, because I think he wants to ranch too.
I feel it's very important to keep ranches in private ownership. There's been a history of agencies buying productive ranches with the premise of protecting the natural resources. And when in fact, once they get a hold of them, you know, either through funding inadequacies or just simply lack of knowledge of the land, what they're trying to protect simply isn't being done. And it's obvious then and now that the best stewards of the land are the ranchers themselves. If you keep ranches in private ownership, their property tax rolls remain, income flows through the counties and the schools, and also, you know, they're hiring people, you know, to work on these ranches as well, so it's good for the economy.
My family started ranching in about the 1870s, and if we had had the option of securing a conservation easement on our family ranch in California before the federal government took it and made it a national park, I think it would have been a much better value for the public as well as for the land. And I think conservation easements and the work that the California Rangeland Trust is doing brings great environmental benefit to California with so much pressure from development and population growth, that this is a very viable option for the future of ranching.
Rangelands are an economic, ecological, and cultural resource that California cannot afford to lose.
We would really ask you to consider supporting the California Rangeland Trust to help us really carry this legacy of ranching on to the next generation. It's part of your legacy, not only the ranching history, but all of the environmental values, the wildlife and the natural resources and these open landscapes that the public enjoys throughout California. With all of the pressures today, the California Rangeland Trust is a great value.